Okay, and now we are on. You can begin.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So, dear young Theosophists, welcome today to our 146th TS International Convention. Kindly note that this forum will actually be live streamed to YouTube for the duration of the panelist discussion. Later, we will have a bit of our own discussions in the breakout rooms that will not be live streamed on YouTube, so not to worry. My name is Han Wen, and I will be your host for today. So firstly, we would like to thank everyone for taking the time to come today. Thank you everyone for your kind support and coming together in the spirit of brotherhood. Please be reminded that there are different languages for today's forum. Please choose your preferred language by renaming your Zoom name with your preferred language in the front of your name. Due to unforeseen time clash, actually the youth forum will be shortened. Initially, we have stipulated 2 hours, but today we will only be able to manage 1 hour and 40 minutes. So sorry for that, and thank you very much for your understanding. So I'm sure the question on everybody's minds is, what will we be discussing today? So the topic of discussion today is an HO question that one faces in the pursuit of all endeavors. What are our challenges? So with respect to Theosophy, of course. I'm sure that we can all attest that this path of spirituality that we are on is often challenging. It is rife with trials and tribulations, and more often than not, one of an uphill climb. Yes, a lot of us can say that the outcomes are incredibly rewarding, and sometimes even the path itself can already be very similarly rewarding for us as well. Yet, we often fall by the wayside because of the challenges we face. And so today, we bring you 4 panelists, fellow journeymen of the path, our fellow young Theosophists, who will actually be sharing with us some of the challenges that they face and we face as well, and some of the ways that they have to kind of overcome them. So before we begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the panelists for taking the time to prepare today's sharing, and their generosity for sharing with us their heartfelt experiences. So a little bit on the format of today's forum. After all the panelists have shared, we will actually be going into smaller rooms, breakout rooms, to hear what our fellow young Theosophists have to say about what the panelists have discussed. There will be some guide questions that we have prepared, and the facilitators will also be there to present and guide us for this discussion. Please feel safe and comfortable to share your thoughts and experience during this discussion. Just share, whatever insights that might have come to you during the course of the panelists sharing. So after this discussion, we will actually be moving on to, each of the discussion will actually have an individual scribe to record what was discussed. And at the end of it, we will have a presentation of what is discussed. So without further ado, let me present our first panelist of the day. Our first panelist is Pradeep from India. He is a 3rd generation Theosophist, member of the Karnataka Theosophical Federation of Indian section, and he has been actively involved in meetings and has given many lectures on behalf of Karnataka Federation. So today, Pradeep will be actually sharing with us the topic, does youth have time to study Theosophy? So one of the first and fundamental questions and one of the most basic challenges that we have is the time that we have enough to study Theosophy, and how we can manage this time aspect. So Pradeep, thank you. Please take it away.
Thank you, Brother Kee Han Wen, for your introduction. At the outset, I bring warm greetings to the success of 146th International Convention of the Theosophical Society on behalf of Karnataka Theosophical Federation. My topic for this talk is, does the youth have time for theosophy? Next. In our daily life, our fellow young friends who are interested in spiritualism but do not know where to seek usually ask some typical questions like, I want to be a spiritual person. Do I have to give up the worldly life? Is it necessary to stay away from friends and family to become a spiritual person? Can I be a spiritual person and still have a job? As a spiritual seeker, should I abstain from socializing and entertainment? These are the questions that we usually hear from our friends who know that we are in this path of spiritual life. Next. To answer these questions for those who knock the doors of spiritualism, I intend to share some thoughts of Dr. Annie Besant from her lecture delivered in the City Temple, London in 1907. I refer to her quotations from the book, The Spiritual Life, Volume 2, Chapter 1, Spiritual Life for the Man of the World. All the quotations that you see in further slides are of Dr. Besant, as quoted in this chapter of the book. Next. Whether a man can lead a spiritual life in the world. In the world is the key word. Can someone be a part of the life in the world and still lead a spiritual life is the question. In every land, in every religion, in every age of the world's history, the answer has been no. This answer comes from deserts of Egypt, the jungles of India, the monastery, and the nunnery in Roman Catholic countries, where people live or give up their worldly life to enter the path of spiritualism. Next. In every land and place where man has sought to find out God by shrinking from the company of men, and if for the knowledge of God and the leading of the spiritual life, it be necessary to fly from the haunts of men, then that life for most of us, especially the youth of today, is impossible. It is difficult for most of us to give up our daily life, our family, our professions, and to stay away from everything to achieve a spiritual goal. Next. We usually hear some statements from our friends such as, if my circumstances were different from what they are, how much more I would do. If only I were not so surrounded by business, so tied by anxieties and cares, so occupied with the work of the world, then I would be able to live a more spiritual life. Dr. Besant rejects this reasoning outright, and she quotes, now that is not true. No circumstances can ever make or mar the unfolding of the spiritual life in man. Spirituality does not depend upon the environment. It depends upon the attitude of the man towards life. Next. The problem lies in the basic approach towards spiritual life. If a man does not understand the relation of the material and the spiritual life, if he separates the one from the other as incompatible and hostile, if on one side he puts the life of the world and on the other the life of the spirit as rivals, as antagonists, as enemies, then it makes it difficult for him to consider the spiritual life as a real and the only way to salvation on earth. Next. Hence, we need to find a mid-path. We need to find how do we balance our life of world and life of spiritualism. In other words, we need to find how to lead a spiritual life being very much part of the life of the world. For that, Dr. Besant quotes, we have to find some alchemy, some magic, by which the life of the world shall be seen to be unreal, and the life of the spirit the only reality. Only then the reality, that is the life of spirit, will express itself through the life of the world. Next slide. How should our approach towards our activities on life of the world be? Remember, the world is thought of God, the expression of the divine mind. All useful activities are forms of divine activity. The merchant, the shopkeeper, the doctor, or anyone doing his respective work is quite as much engaged in a divine activity as any preacher in his holy place of prayer. Every useful, honest, service-minded work is a part and form of the divine activity. Next slide. We should always think that all work done in the world is God's work. Only then, whether we are a trader, a merchant, a doctor, a lawyer, teacher, or doing any other work, we start to see a new view of life. And we will feel that the activity with which we are engaged is part of the great working of the world, which is divine. Next slide. The main objective of ours should be duty must be done. The wheels of the world must be kept turning. Dr. Besant says, whatever may be your work in the world, it matters not. If you begin to do it not because it brings you a livelihood, though there is nothing to be ashamed of in its bringing you the power to live here. If you begin to do it slowly, gradually, more and more because it ought to be done and not to because you want to gain something for yourself, then you are taking the first step towards the spiritual life. Next slide. Then what about our desires, our attachments, our possessions? Have you ever asked yourself why around you objects that attract you are found on every side, things that you want to possess? Dr. Besant says, just for the same reason as when a mother wants to coax her child into the exertion that will induce it to walk, she dangles before its eyes, a little out of reach, some dazzling toys. Hence, all the things that attract us in the life of world are only toys that bring about an urge to attain or to obtain within us. She further quotes, that is the object of the divine teacher. The toys are thrown aside. Once we achieve the exertion to gain it, we move on to the next interesting thing. And gradually, this makes every one of us prepared to pass from one stage of evolution to the next. Next slide. Further, as we gradually grow and learn to lead a spiritual life, we start to feel that we are a co-worker with the divine. Our effort should be to make our work great by knitting it to the universal work. We shall feel as part and an individual form of that divine worker, performing his duty towards mankind, system of worlds and universes at large. Next slide. It is, of course, very hard to perform every action as an act of sacrifice. But only then a man becomes the perfect spiritual man. We often can't take failures. We feel sad to see our work being wasted or useless. No matter how honest we were, how selfless we were, sometimes our work fails and do not result as we expect. At this moment, we shall see it as a sacrifice and look on the ruins of work with calm content. Next slide. Madam Besant says, it is not that the divine is not within you. The ideal come before the manifestation. The thought creates the form. And in every one of us, there is sleeping, as it were, the divine image. All our efforts should be to make that image to manifest, to become a spiritual person. Next slide. We have to feel that divinity is imprisoned within every one of us. Only we have the privilege to liberate that divinity. Just like a sculptor chips off the useless stone pieces to liberate a beautiful statue inside a rock. Only then we realize that each one of us are just images of God or the supreme divinity. Next slide. Coming back to my question, does the youth have time for theosophy? I shall proudly say yes. In every duty we perform, with every person we meet, through every service we render, we shall lead a spiritual, a theosophical life. Next slide. So again, repeat that all the quotations were taken from Madam Besant's lecture and from this book, The Spiritual Life, Volume 2. Thank you so much for your time.
Key, unmute yourself, please.
Kee Han, you have been unmuted.
You are muted right now. I'll send you a request and then to unmute yourself. And
Yes, Kee Han, you are unmuted.
Hi.
Oh, no. That's
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that technical difficulty. So thank you, Pradeep, for that talk. Very interesting talk about how we actually have the time to study theosophy, and that it is more of a union of life and spirituality rather than life and spirituality as separate. And there is spirituality in the work that we do, and there is spirituality in life, and it's a question or matter of seeing it and how we can actually integrate and put the two together. So thank you very much, Pradeep, for the talk. So for the second panelist that we have today is Clover Wu from Singapore. So Clover is a member of the Singapore Lodge Theosophical Society since 2014. She is a kindergarten teacher with an ardent love for theosophy, nature, and the arts. And she has a belief that children would grow up, very wholesome if they are immersed in theosophy, nature, and the arts. So Clover will be sharing with us the topic today of sustaining interest in theosophy. And please take it away, Clover. Oh, Clover, are you able to unmute yourself? Oh,
now
Clover
you
is not
can
able
unmute
to.
yourself. Sure. Yeah.
Hey, hello everyone. Please let me know if you can't hear me very clearly or if I'm too soft. Okay, please allow me to share. I'm going to share my presentation. Okay, thank you. Sound is good.
You can share also.
Okay. So good afternoon. I'm Clover from the Singapore Lodge, and I'll be sharing my thoughts on why it can be challenging to sustain our interest in theosophy, especially for the youth, and also some ways we can not only sustain it, but transform ourselves along the way. Okay, sorry. So taking an interest in theosophy and joining the TS is a sign that we're seeking meaning in life beyond the physical and temporal. And when youths are drawn to theosophy, there's potential for their interest to grow in enthusiasm, which would make our theosophical practice more active and more dynamic. But their interest is often short-lived and may therefore be withdrawn along with their TS membership. So theosophy is endlessly fascinating to me, and I'm sure to everyone. And I think the biggest reason for that is it opens our minds to possibilities and realities of ourselves and our world far beyond the physical. We learn about a universe of purpose that imbues all of our smaller purposes with greater meaning. Here are 3 of many reasons why I think theosophy is the coolest. So you can also ask yourselves, what makes theosophy so cool, in your opinion? So it connects science and spirituality, connecting things that are often seen as paradoxes and dichotomies, and brings us beyond them. Illuminates everything, shows us our divine heritage and destiny, and keeps us rooted in it, even if gloom and doom may sometimes seem overpowering. And shows us that the pursuit of happiness goes beyond the personal self, and it increases in meaning as we unfold spiritually. So if theosophy is so interesting, why is it challenging to sustain our interest in it? So here are some challenges that I think makes a lot of sense. So pressures and the first one is pressures and attractions of everyday life. So an initial interest may have sparked the desire to learn more about the ancient wisdom, but the need to pursue material success and happiness according to societal standards, something the youth is very much embroiled in, such as gaining popularity, becoming wealthy, having a family, can feel more urgent and real than the benefits of spiritual development. Therefore, theosophy can become a mere hobby and pushed aside. And also, we indulge our lower nature. So allowing our lower nature to pull us from one thrill to another makes it hard to transition for example, playing video games or reading an exciting comic to studying theosophy or meditating, because we are simply not in the right mood. Those things are too stimulating to the senses. There are too many things that stimulate our senses. And also because of weak purpose. If the purpose for our interest in theosophy doesn't evolve beyond theory and is not clear and strong enough, then our interest in it can easily wane. So some of the ways to sustain our interest in theosophy are cultivate enthusiasm. So when we are enthusiastic about theosophy, it fills us with joy, and we want to discover more and more about it. It is a youthful characteristic of interest, making us optimistic and courageous no matter the obstacles we face in our spiritual quest. When the ancient wisdom and its transcendental insights about the meaning of life gives us more enthusiasm than material pursuits, we would naturally devote more time and effort to the latter. And this enthusiasm that would drive our interest would be more mellow and deliberate than the impulsive kind, because our focus is on the eternal side of things. We can cultivate enthusiasm about theosophy in our lodges by changing the way we present it. Some ways could be relating theosophical truths to real life and having activities that allow students to explore theosophy in practical ways. For example, we can have talks or workshops on applying theosophy to relevant issues relevant to the youth like productivity, depression, which can be conducted more interactively through dialogic exchanges as well as exercises. Group meditation and games are also good ways to build a community where students can explore spirituality, both inwards and outwards. We can also change the way we do spirituality in our lives, not just relying on reading, but actively assimilating ideas and practicing ideals, deliberately working to live a theosophical life. And we can also live theosophy as we let theosophical truths seep into our lives and influence our decisions and the way we see the world. They gradually become more of an ever-deepening experience than just mere interest. Looking beyond the material side of life and seeing the spiritual side of everything can help us see the good in even the meanest people and improve our relationship because of that, in relationships because of that. And also helps us devote more time on our spiritual development. Knowing that all is good in God's scheme gives us assurance and equanimity in the darkest situations. And our soul's purpose becomes clearer as we live theosophy, because as we align ourselves more and more with our higher promptings, they guide and motivate us to be of service to others who are as much a part of the one life as we are. Knowledge thus becomes what William Meader in one of his talks calls an innate and intuitive wisdom as we live theosophy. And what used to be an interest stimulated by the learning of knowledge becomes a love for the ever-deepening illumination that we open up to in our spiritual quest. Finally, train the mind. So behind every success is hard work, and that's true for theosophy too. We need mind, emotions, and body to be harmonized and obedient to the will in order to work long enough at our theosophical studies and deep enough into our meditations for our interest in theosophy to become stronger, more stable, and more active. Furthermore, inertia can set in, especially for new students, in response to the new moral and intellectual life that we're entering into in our theosophical journey. Setting a regular routine for engaging in theosophical thinking and activities is key to overcoming this inertia, because it sets up a cumulative momentum that we can get back into easily, and we won't lose much of that momentum in between sessions. With regular and persistent practice of concentration, one can understand how the mind runs from one thought to another, and how by observing this process, we can direct the flow of thought by will. Most importantly, Ernest Wood says in his book, Concentration, that we can deliberately cultivate a mood for engaging in spiritual development that anchors us to our purpose for it. Cultivating a mood for theosophy, therefore, and I quote Ernest Wood, predisposes the mind to certain associations of thought so that whatever may turn up in the world or in the mind will lead on to it. This requires concentrating on polarizing our thoughts. So let's now try an exercise in the polarization of thought given in the book Concentration. So I've generated 3 words randomly using a random word generator app. So we'll try to concentrate on finding one or many connections between each word and theosophy. You can do it mentally or write them down on a piece of paper. So, for example, the first word is prerequisite, a random word prerequisite. So in your head or on paper, you can write prerequisite and you connect it to the word theosophy with an arrow, and you try to come up with, concentrate on establishing a connection between them, a connection, an association of prerequisite to theosophy. And this can, over time, practice this kind of practice can help to cultivate our mood for theosophy. And you can also practice polarizing your thoughts to any other ideas that and other purposes that you have in life that you really want to cultivate a mood for. So yeah, thank you for listening. That's the end of my talk.
Thank you, Clover, for that very interesting talk on how to sustain interest in theosophy. So, yeah. So for the third panelist that we have today is John from the Philippines. He is a member of the Free Space TSU group and the Golden Link Theosophical Lodge. He volunteers to different organizations promoting youth empowerment, environment protection, and mental health awareness. So, we have discussed about whether or not there is time for theosophy, and the answer we have discussed is yes. And furthermore, we have also discussed about how we can actually sustain our interest in theosophy. So the next topic will be how we can actually make theosophy more relevant to the youth. So John, please take it away. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Brother Kee, for your introduction. It was a wonderful day to everybody. Happy 146th International Convention. I am very glad to volunteer as one of the representatives for this youth forum. Again, I am Johnderson Herbolario from the Philippine Archipelago, and here's my sharing as we meet with the youth about our challenges. We are very informed that for the generation to be better, we have to invest to our youth. As I quoted, the youth is the hope of the future. Because the youth are basically the torch bearers of a dream that we would wish to see under the light of the theosophical understandings. I think everybody would agree that when there are youth among our different lodges, the energy and the discussions are more dynamic, isn't it? There are freshness, excitement, creativity, and spirit of curiosity, which are very innate among the youth. However, it seems to me, at least in my observation, that the majority of the members in the society are elderly. Although this is not a problem, however, the percentage of our youth members who are really young are very low. I hardly see members who are 30 years old or 25 years old or even 20 years old or 15 years old. So my assumption is that we are having this challenge in somehow relating with the youth. Making my question, how do we make theosophy more relevant for the youth? We are very relevant, actually. We are already relevant for the youth because as we understand theosophy, there are many things in theosophy teachings that we can actually apply and relay to the youth for them to be guided. But it seems that in terms of our membership of the youth, we still have more way to go in order to expand our influences. So with this, I have set of questions. My talk is more on questions that we may try to ponder about as an organization. So I know that you can relate with this. TS have this social thing that we take our group photos, right? So we'd like to smile. And I'm happy that later on we're going to have group pictures. It serves a purpose. One is to cherish the moments, and two, for others to see and have a glimpse of our past activities. I know that you can relate well, that when you try to review our group pictures, many of them do not contain the young members of the society. Many pictures, at least in my observation, show very serious and very formal gatherings. So That was actually my perception when I first met TS about 6 years ago. But it changed when I became a member. The TS, aside from meaningfulness, has also dynamics, and there is fun. So the question is, how do we make it visible for the general youth, or for the youth? Maybe we can explore adding more pictures of the youth representing the Theosophical Society. Just to give you a practical example, I type the words Theosophical Society in Google, and this is what I get. These are black and white pictures with very serious people in the picture. They are very well respected people, uh, and I could really understand the very first pictures were there. On the other hand, just to give a representation of my point, I randomly search the word youth and look at the difference. Look at the difference. You see colors, you see energy, creativity, happy people, spontaneous and fun. Now, if we try to relate with the youth, then we have to touch their style. We have to connect with their energy levels. So this leads me to a contemplation. What image is the society trying to relay to the youth? My next question is this, which could be treated as a challenge for all the lodges around the globe. How do we address the much relevant activities for the youth? The society is rich with meditation sessions, theosophy study, lodge meetings, and philosophical discussions. But there are contemporary issues of the youth as a teacher, in my observation, that we also need to address. We have to ponder, how does the Theosophical Society deal equally with mental and reflective discussions and its practical counterparts, more relevant for the youth? Is theosophy just a study or meditation, or is it also an action that can be interpreted by our youth? Can we translate the theosophical understandings into advocacies that directly address these contemporary problems of the youth? Things like drug or alcohol abuse, materialism, stress and time management, growing up too fast, body image, violence in schools, education inequality, use of technology, family relationships, e-games addictions, identifying fake and misleading information, environment protection, LGBTQIA plus community, cultivating peace, and many, many more. I believe that when we try to connect with them, we need to understand and help them with these contemporary challenges that they face. In this case, we can be relevant for them and they can be ready for the theosophical teachings. Leading me to another question, which is very fundamental and observable. Why is it hard for the TS influencers or speakers to attract younger members in their lodge? This is one of the challenges of, I think, majority of the lodges around the globe, particularly here in the Philippines. TS is very wonderful, yet we have difficulty to attract younger members to stay and be sustained here in the society. What approaches do we need to explore in order to effectively connect with the youth? Let us try to review our lodges. How many of them are the youth? How many of them developed sustained interest in attending to our lodges? Are these youth members able to express themselves well? Do they find our lodges relevant for them? Just an additional idea, in the present and surely in the future, a lot of the youth will be mostly online. Aside from their contemporary issues, there are also contemporary platforms. A lot of our youth nowadays find it effective to listen to shorter but meaningful and practical talks than to longer ones. This is something that we need to consider. I'd like to ask, how can we effectively utilize the different online platforms to connect and relay the theosophical teachings with the present youth? As of this time, there are about 3 billion Facebook users. YouTube has more than 2 billion users, and TikTok, which was popularized recently, reached 1 billion already. Majority of the users are on the youth bracket. In 2018, research have found that the youth almost constantly use these social media platforms, and they use them longer than they read paper books. Now, as I end my talk, I'd like to review my questions which can be addressed in our breakout discussions later. Number one, how does the Theosophical Society address more the relevant issues and activities for the youth? And number two, what approach or approaches do we need to explore in order to effectively connect with the youth? Once again, a wonderful day to everybody, and thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for that wonderful talk. I think there's a lot of chatter afoot about how this relevancy of theosophy is to the youth. So I think there will be a lot of discussion on that topic later on. Thank you for that very insightful talk and how you actually managed to link our daily issues or today's society with theosophy. So now we will be going to our fourth and final panelist for today, which is Arzoo from New Zealand. She is originally from Pakistan, but grew up in Switzerland. She has been an active member of TS in Wellington since 2019. She has given talks on Sufism and Kundalini Yoga at TS in Wellington and New Plymouth. So one of the things that she really liked about TS is the chance to meet and connect with like-minded people on her spiritual path. And Arzoo also comes from a long line of Sufi healers, so some heritage there. And finally, she will be sharing with us today is an act of surrender and how theosophy can help. So, we have heard from the other speakers about whether or not we have time for theosophy and how do we, sustain interest in theosophy and how do we make it more relevant to the youth. So Arzoo will be delivering actually her own experiences of how this surrendering has actually helped her in theosophy. So Arzoo, thank you very much. Pass it over to you.
Thanks, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? I just want to, if I could just check my sound, if you could just let me know in the chat. Thank you very much. And before I get started, my greetings to everyone who's attending the convention and greetings from the Wellington Lodge here in New Zealand. A good evening to everyone, and it's a great pleasure for me to be talking today and to be a part of this panel. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I am going to share my screen, and it will be, let's just see with that. All right. So when it came to choosing a title for the panel, I thought about as to what I could talk about, something that would be relevant, something that could be relatable, and also something also something that would be personal, that I could share with you as a TS member, and to have that aspect of storytelling, but also to bring some gifts from from the title I chose. So my title is The Act of Surrender and How Theosophy Can Help. And before I dive into it, I don't have actually a lot of slides. When I do a lot of my public speaking, a lot of it is from the heart. And I have, so I'll just start with that. And so why did I choose this specific title? As someone who was a few years back, I'm going to put my hands up, very much a control freak and trying to control the external reality as best as she could. When I first encountered the word surrender, for me, and we have this connotation and this idea that surrender, what it means is that you're giving up and it is being passive. And since joining the Theosophical Society here in Wellington in 2018, it has been a very beautiful journey of unraveling and uncovering exactly what surrender means to me on a personal and also on a spiritual level, and how Theosophy and being a TS member has helped and is helping as I occupy this space of surrender and really get to know how this idea applies to me and appeals to me. So I moved to New Zealand from Switzerland in 2017, and I had visited the country earlier in 2017 on a solo trip. And I fell in love with the land and the energy and just the pull to actually move here for good was so strong that 5 months later, I quit my job in Switzerland, and with just 2 suitcases, I moved to New Zealand. I didn't have a job. I didn't know anyone. But for me, that was the first lesson in surrendering to whatever was waiting for me here in New Zealand. I had to have this faith and listen to that inner voice, that intuition that I had to move here, and everything else would just align and the path would become visible to me once I arrived here. So I arrived here in 2017 October, and I haven't looked back since. And when people ask me if I miss Europe, and I say, yes, well, I do miss family and some food from Switzerland, but New Zealand is home, and it is a gift that keeps on giving. And one of the biggest gift that it has given me is on how to surrender and to keep on surrendering on a daily basis. So when we talk about surrendering, as I mentioned before, a lot of people think that it's a passive action, that it means giving up or giving in. I am going to argue against that today and say surrender actually leads to well-being and enlightenment, and ultimately it leads to happiness. So when we talk about surrender, what does that mean? And for me, it's the ultimate act of power. Instead of being weak, you are actually showing a lot of power and bravery when you're surrendering. It means trusting, having awareness, being guided by your inner knowing, by your higher self, by spirit, universe, God, whatever you want to refer to it as, to have that inner knowing that whatever you are letting go of, that there is something better waiting for you on the other side, and it will be for your highest good. It means being present. It means being open. And most importantly, it means coming from a space of responsiveness, not reacting to the external reality or to the external situation that we might be faced with at times. And when we talk about surrender, I like to say that surrender at a deepest level. It is being aware of what is within you. And once you realize that, and once you tap into that, then what happens is it removes the duality, it removes the suffering, it removes the sadness, and it puts you in a very, very powerful and a present state of being that you have let go of that external control, and whatever is going to come your way, you have the tools and the resources to respond to it from a place of power, from a place of compassion, from a place of awareness, and from a place of trust. So the way I like to see the sequence is surrender. It starts with acceptance, then it leads to trust, and then there is gratitude that happens after that, being grateful that you are in that space and you have the courage and you have the resilience to go, I'm surrendering to the unknown or to the uncertainty. So a really good example is COVID-19 at the moment. You know, we cannot control the external reality, but what we can control is the internal. And in that way, this act of surrender is really, really powerful. And I definitely believe that life begins when you fully surrender to what is happening and knowing that what is happening will happen. And all you can do is just come back to yourself, come back to your inner temple and go, how am I going to respond to it? And this is actually one of my favorite quotes by Rumi. And I had this on when I first moved to New Zealand, and I've actually got it framed because it's a constant reminder for me that as long as I keep surrendering, everything is going to be okay. And it is a very, very powerful exercise because by surrendering, you're accepting whatever the situation is, and then you can decide whatever action you want to take. Now, how does Theosophy help when it comes to this act of surrender? When I decided to join the TS, this was in 2018, and it was, some would say that that it's a stroke of luck. I think that it was all connected and aligned. Theosophy, when you walk through the doors, if you could visualize that, it asks you to surrender the outside noise and really tune in what is inside of you, to trust the process that you're here for a reason. And whatever magical gifts and lessons that await you once you join the TS, you're open to it. That is a form of surrendering in itself, going, I'm open to the knowledge, I'm open to the experiences, I'm open to the connections that are going to come by being part of a Theosophical society. And what I have found by surrendering, going, yep, I'm meant to be here, and let's see what this brings me, or what gifts it brings me. I have found a safe community of like-minded people who have become my family. The TS is also an anchor that has kept me stable on my spiritual journey, and it still keeps me stable as I navigate the spiritual journey. And doors have opened, and it's also given a meaning to my life of like how I can be of service to the collective and to other people. And that is something that is very close to my heart. And it all started by letting go of control and having faith and trust that whatever is coming my way, it is for my highest good, and then how I can use it to be of service to humanity. And in that way, Theosophy has really, really helped me in terms of looking at the outer turmoil, sometimes that seems really loud for us, and finding that inner peace when you think that it's impossible to find that inner peace. And I'm going to close the presentation with this beautiful quote by Eckhart Tolle, who says that complete surrender usually happens through living. Your very life is the ground where that happens. There may be a partial surrender, and then there may be an opening, and then you may engage in spiritual practice. And the TS has been that opening for me, where I surrendered and I said, right, I'm here in the present moment. I'm going to join the TS and see what comes up. And in some ways, by joining the Theosophical Society and being part of that space, it's really helped me to really live my life the way it's meant to be. And there's so many more gifts that will be coming after that. It's a never-ending well of gift once you join the TS. But yeah, it starts with surrender. And that's a very brave step to take, but it starts with that. And that is my presentation.
Thank you, Arzoo, for that very heartfelt presentation, coupled with your own experience about how surrendering is for you. So with that, that concludes our panelist talks. I hope everyone gleaned something from today's panelist sharings and discussions. Different aspects of how theosophy can be relevant to us. How do we keep the fire going? How do we make the time? Practical attempts at theosophy. So with that, we have actually a promotional video about TS from Sarah. After the video, the YouTube live streaming will stop, and then we can proceed to our discussions. Yeah. Sarah, would you like to share the video with us?
Yes, thank you, Kee. Just
Thank
before
you.
that, yeah, I would like to say a few words about will be an announcement for an exciting event that has been confirmed for next year to hold an international gathering of young theosophists. And it will take place in one of the 3 international theosophical centers in the Netherlands, in Europe. So today I speak on behalf of the organizing committee, which will be working together in the coming months to plan and organize this event. And we hope that many young members from different countries around the world will be able to attend to share this experience together with our views on theosophical teachings and volunteering activities, finding ways to be of service and gather inspiration to face the challenges of the future, as one of the panelists already spoke about. Moreover, the President Tim Boyd will be present during this gathering. And now I will show you a little preview we have prepared with some basic information regarding the dates and the program activities. So I will share now.
So thank you for sharing the video, Sarah. The YouTube live stream will now be